Caleb, they're opening the dam, and when they do, everyone in Greyhaven will hear us. My dead sister's voice came through a radio that had not been plugged in for 23 years. I stood alone in my mother's basement, one hand resting on the dusty workbench, the other holding a cardboard box of cassette tapes she had hidden behind the furnace. Above me, the old house creaked in the cold October wind, settling around the silence left by her funeral. I had spent the afternoon shaking hands, accepting casseroles, and listening to people tell me Miriam Mercer had been a kind woman. Not one of them knew she had filled an entire basement with recordings of the dead. The radio sat beneath a yellowed sheet on a metal shelf. I recognized at the moment I pulled the cloth away. It was a walnut tabletop set with a round amber dial, tarnished knobs, and the faded letters WGHV stamped beneath the speaker. Lily used to keep it beside her bed. She would spin the dial after midnight, searching for distant stations while I complained that the static kept me awake. She was 16 when she disappeared during the flood of 2003. I was 13, old enough to remember the search parties, the helicopters, and my mother standing beside Morrow Reservoir every morning as if Lily might rise from the water and walk home. The police never found a body. For years, I told myself that made things easier. In truth, uncertainty had only given grief more places to hide. I checked the power cord. It had been cut cleanly near the back panel. There were no batteries inside. Still, the dial glowed with a weak orange light. The needle rested at 610 a.m., the old frequency of WGHV, a station that had been abandoned since before Lily vanished. Static hissed from the speaker, low and uneven, like rain falling inside a wall. Then Lily whispered, "Caleb, do not say my full name." Every muscle in my body tightened. The voice was older than I remembered, but it carried the same slight breath between words, the same careful way she said my name when she was afraid of waking our mother. I leaned closer. "Lily." The static snapped sharply. Somewhere inside it, several voices answered at once, too faint to understand. The basement light flickered. A drop of water struck the floor beside my shoe. Then another. I looked up, expecting a leaking pipe, but the ceiling was dry. The water was coming from the radio. Clear beads gathered along the wooden cabinet and rolled down the front, as if the machine had been lifted from the bottom of the lake. "Listen to me," Lily said. "They are opening the dam in 7 days." I could barely breathe. "Who is?" "Do not ask questions yet. You only get one." Her words broke apart beneath a burst of interference. "And if another voice asks whether you're listening, do not answer." A man's voice suddenly rose beneath hers, calm and polished, like an announcer reading the evening news. "Caleb Mercer, age 36, currently standing 12 feet below the kitchen of 18 Willow Street." I stepped back so quickly that my shoulder struck the furnace. The voice continued without changing tone. "Occupation, audio restauration spécialiste. Residence, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Cause of death," Lily shouted through the static. "Turn it off." I grabbed the left knob and twisted it hard. The dial light went dark, but the man kept speaking. "October 23rd, 1:13 in the morning, inside the North Service tunnel beneath Morrow Reservoir." I yanked the radio from the shelf. It was heavier than it looked and cold enough to sting my palms. I dropped it onto the workbench and pulled open the rear panel. The inside was packed with dust, dead wires, and glass tubes that should never have worked. Yet from somewhere deep within the cabinet came a faint ticking sound, steady as a clock counting down. I forced the knob again. This time the voice stopped. The basement fell silent except for my breathing. On the workbench, the cardboard box of tapes had tipped over. Dozens of cassettes lay scattered across the concrete. Each one had a date written in my mother's handwriting. Some were recent. Others went back decades. I picked up the nearest tape. October 16th, 2026. 7 days before the date the voice had given for my death. Beneath the date, my mother had written a single sentence. "Caleb finally hears Lily." I searched the rest of the box. Every tape was labeled with the same time, 1:13 in the morning. Several carried Lily's name. Others were marked with names I did not recognize. Aaron Bell, Rose Dempsey, Thomas Valle. One cassette had no name at all. It simply read, Do not let the voices learn who they are. My phone showed 1:16 in the morning. I had been in the basement less than 20 minutes, but the windows at the top of the wall had fog from the inside. Through the glass, I could see the dark line of the hills beyond Greyhaven and the red warning lights on the abandoned WGHV tower blinking above the trees. The tower had not been connected to power since 1998. I knew because, as a teenager, I had watched the utility company cut the cables. But that night, its lights pulsed in a slow pattern. 3 flashes. A pause. 3 more. The radio clicked behind me. I did not turn around. The dial light returned, spreading a thin orange glow across the basement floor. A woman began humming through the speaker. It was the lullaby my mother used to sing when Lily and I were children. Then Lily's voice came back, weaker now and far away. "Cal," she whispered. My stomach tightened. She had called me Caleb before. Lily never did that. Not when we were young. Not even when she was angry. To her, I had always been Cal. I turned slowly toward the radio. "Is it really you?" The static deepened, swallowing half her reply. "I'm still at the station." Mom knew. She kept me quiet because the others listen when we speak. The polished male voice returned beneath hers. "Are you listening, Caleb?" Every instinct told me to answer. The question felt harmless, almost ordinary. But Lily had warned me. I pressed my lips together. The radio crackled, and the man asked again, this time using my mother's voice. "Honey, are you listening?" I backed toward the stairs. Water spread beneath the workbench in a thin, shining pool. In its reflection, the amber dial looked like an open eye. I reached the first step when Lily screamed, "Do not let them open the dam." The radio went dead. At that exact moment, my phone vibrated. A news alert filled the screen. Greyhaven officials had approved an emergency release from Morrow Reservoir, scheduled for 7 days later at 1:13 in the morning. Beneath the headline was a photograph of the dam taken that afternoon. Near the edge of the spillway, almost hidden in the mist, stood a girl in a pale jacket. I enlarged the image until it blurred. Around her wrist was the silver charm bracelet Lily had been wearing the night she disappeared. The photograph should have been impossible, but the bracelet around the girl's wrist was the one detail I could not explain away. I had seen that silver chain hundreds of times when Lily was alive. It carried 3 charms, a tiny moon, a brass key, and a blue glassbird with 1 chipped wing. I had broken the bird charm during an argument this summer before she disappeared. No county photographer in Greyhaven could have known that. I stayed in the basement until sunrise, staring at the image while the radio remained dark and silent on the workbench. By 7 in the morning, I had convinced myself there had to be a rational explanation. Old grief could reshape familiar patterns. Mist could resemble a person. A reflection could resemble a bracelet. Then I found the same photograph on the county emergency management website. The girl was still there. I drove to the courthouse shortly after 9, carrying the cassette marked October 16th in my coat pocket. Greyhaven looked smaller than I remembered, its brick storefronts pressed against the hills as if the town were trying to hide from the reservoir above it. Orange notices had been taped to telephone poles along Main Street, warning residents about the controlled release scheduled for the following week. The notices used careful language: routine pressure reduction, no anticipated danger, temporary road closures near the spillway. Nothing about a dead radio predicting my death. The county records office occupied the 2nd floor of the old courthouse. Nora Whitaker sat behind a long oak counter surrounded by gray filing cabinets and boxes of survey maps. I recognized her before she looked up. Her hair was darker than it had been in high school, and faint lines had formed at the corners of her eyes, but she still wore the same thoughtful expression she had whenever she suspected someone was about to lie to her. "Caleb Mercer," she said, "you only come back when something terrible happens." That has started to feel like a family tradition. Her expression softened. "I'm sorry about your mother." I thanked her, then showed her the photograph on my phone. Nora studied it for several seconds. "This was taken yesterday. Look near the spillway." She enlarged the image. The color left her face so gradually I almost missed it. "That jacket," she whispered. "Lily had one like that. So did half the girls in town. Not with those white stripes on the sleeves." She looked at me. You remember the search posters? I remembered them too well. Lily smiling beneath the words, missing since October 23rd, 2003. Pale jacket, blue jeans, silver bracelet. Nora closed the photograph and glanced toward the hallway before lowering her voice. Why are you asking about this? I took the cassette from my pocket and set it on the counter. Because my mother recorded something she was not supposed to hear. I told Nora about the radio. I left out the prediction of my death until the end. She listened without interrupting, though her fingers tightened around the edge of the desk when I repeated Lily's warning about the dam. When I finished, Nora stood and locked the office door. The reservoir release is not routine, she said. 3 weeks ago, inspectors found abnormal pressure in the northern wall. The county does not want panic, so they're lowering the water level slowly. Why at 1:13 in the morning? They say traffic control. Fewer people on the service roads. She opened a drawer and removed a thick folder marked Morrow Reservoir Operations. But the time was changed yesterday. It was originally scheduled for midnight. Who changed it? Sheriff Owen Pike signed a revised order. The name pulled an old memory. Owen had been a deputy when Lily vanished. His father, Samuel Pike, had led the search. Nora flipped through the folder until she found a maintenance map. A narrow tunnel ran from the northern wall of the dam toward the hillside below the abandoned WGHV station. This is the North Service Tunnel, I said. The voice on the radio named it. Nora stared at me. That tunnel was sealed in 1958. Then why is it still on a current operations map? She did not answer. Instead, she pointed to a note written near the tunnel entrance. Auxiliary antenna chamber. The words made no sense until I remembered the blinking red lights on the tower. The station had equipment under the reservoir. I asked. The original engineers used a submerged grounding system for the transmitter. At least, that is what the old records say. Nora pulled another file from the cabinet. Inside was a photograph of WGHV taken before the valley was flooded. A steel cable descended from the station into a field where Morrow Reservoir now stood. At the end of the cable was a circular antenna frame nearly 30 feet wide. If the water level drops, I said, that antenna could be exposed. Nora nodded slowly. In 7 days. The cassette player in her office clicked on by itself. Neither of us had touched it. The machine was empty, yet a soft hiss came from a speaker. Then Lily's voice said, "The bracelet is where I left it." Nora grabbed the power cord and pulled it from the wall. The voice continued. "Room 2, behind the glass." I moved closer. "Lily, what room?" "You already know." Static swelled, followed by a distant knocking sound. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more. Nora covered her mouth. "That pattern," she said. "I heard it at the station when we were kids." I looked at her. "What station?" "WGHV. Lily took me there once." The memory on Nora's face was not surprise. It was guilt. She said she had found a room that did not appear on the building plans. Before I could ask more, the cassette player spoke in the polished voice from the radio. "Are you listening, Nora Whitaker?" Nora inhaled sharply. I reached for her hand before she could answer. The player fell silent. 10 minutes later, we were driving toward the abandoned station with a maintenance map folded between us. WGHV stood on a wooded ridge 3 miles north of town behind a chain link. Fence bent open by years of weather. The brick building had narrow windows and a rusted transmission tower rising above it. No warning lights flashed in daylight. The front door was secured with a county padlock, but the station remained county property, and Nora carried a municipal master key as part of her records work. Inside, the air smelled of damp plaster and burned dust. Sunlight filtered through dirty windows, revealing a lobby filled with overturned chairs and water-stained posters for broadcasts that ended decades ago. We followed a corridor to the main studio. The control room glass was clouded with age. Beyond it stood a microphone, a desk, and a wall clock frozen at 1:13. Nora found a metal door at the rear of the studio. A faded number 2 had been painted above it. According to the floor plan, the wall behind that door should have opened directly onto the hillside. The lock turned before Nora inserted the key. Cold air moved through the gap. The hidden room was narrow and windowless, lined with shelves of reel-to-reel tapes. A single wooden chair faced a dark pane of observation glass. On the floor beneath it lay Lily's silver bracelet. The moon charm, the brass key, and the chipped blue bird were all still attached. I picked it up with shaking fingers. The metal was wet. Behind the observation glass, something shifted in the darkness. I called her full name before I remembered the warning. Lillian Mercer? Every tape on the shelves began to turn at once. A chorus of whispers filled the room, repeating her name until the walls seemed to breathe with it. Then one voice rose above the others, pleased and patient. Now we remember her. The moment the voice said, "Now we remember her," the observation glass turned white with condensation, and dozens of names began appearing across it, as if invisible fingers were writing from the other side. Nora grabbed my sleeve and pulled me toward the door, but the metal handle would not move. Every reel on the shelves spun faster, filling the hidden room with overlapping whispers. Some voices cried for help. Others repeated dates, street names, and fragments of prayers. Beneath them all, the polished announcer spoke with perfect calm. Lillian Mercer, age 16, last seen October 23rd, 2003. Status unresolved. I pressed both hands against the door and forced it with my shoulder. The latch finally released, and Nora and I stumbled into the studio. The reel stopped at once. Behind us, the hidden door slammed shut without being touched. The wall clock above the control board remained frozen at 1:13, but its second hand began moving backward. Nora stared at it, then at the bracelet in my palm. "We need to leave." We ran through the corridor and crossed the lobby as a low tone began pulsing through speakers that had no wires. Outside, the afternoon sky had darkened. Clouds moved over the ridge, and the transmission tower gave a slow metallic groan even though there was no wind. We reached Nora's car before the station doors opened behind us. No one stepped out. Instead, my mother's voice drifted from the building. "Caleb, you forgot the tape." I stopped. Nora seized my arm. "That is not her." "I know." "Then keep walking." My mother called again, softer this time. "Honey, please." I cannot remember Lily's face. The words struck harder than any threat. I took one step toward the station before Nora moved between me and the door. "Your mother is dead," she said. "Whatever is in there knows what you need to hear." The doors closed. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then the car radio turned on. Static filled the speakers, followed by 3 knocks, a pause, and 3 more. Nora started the engine and drove down the ridge without touching the radio controls. The signal faded only after the station disappeared behind the trees. We did not return to the courthouse. Nora took me to a small repair shop near the edge of town where an old man named Harold Voss lived in 2 rooms above a garage. The sign outside read Voss Radio and Appliance, though half the letters had fallen away. Harold opened the door before we knocked. He was thin, white-haired, and leaning on a cane carved with tiny radio towers. His eyes went directly to Lily's bracelet. "You said her name in the room," he said. Nora stiffened. "How do you know that?" "Because the frequency changed." He stepped aside. "Come in before it notices where you are." The apartment smelled of coffee, solder, and old paper. Radios covered every shelf, but none had knobs. Harold had removed them all. He led us to a table where a hand-drawn map of Morrow Reservoir lay beneath a glass pane. Red lines connected the abandoned station, the dam, and a circle beneath the northern part of the lake. "The first transmitter was built in 1956, he said. WGHV used a buried grounding array in the valley. When the county began filling Morrow Reservoir the following year, the array was left beneath the rising water. Active without electricity?" I asked. "Electricity is not the only thing that carries a voice." Harold opened a metal box and removed a stack of yellowed station logs. The first page was dated June 18th, 1957. 3 days of rain sent a surge into the half-filled reservoir and flooded the lower valley. The station received the warning at 12:47 in the morning. The owner, Charles Rook, refused to broadcast it immediately. He wanted time to alert the wealthy families living on the western ridge before the valley roads became crowded. Nora looked at the map. "How long did he wait?" 26 minutes. The emergency announcement finally began at 1:13. By then, the lower neighborhoods were already trapped. Harold placed a finger on a list of names. 60 people died in the lower valley. Thomas Vale, the announcer who finally tried to broadcast the warning, vanished at the microphone when water forced its way through the old antenna conduit. He became the 61st name. The power failed, the tower went dark, and the county later completed the reservoir over what remained. 3 nights later, the station transmitted again with no one inside. I looked at the names and thought of the writing on the observation glass. The dead were speaking. At first, only fragments. Names, addresses, final thoughts. Then the voices began joining together. Over time, they learned how to imitate people outside the valley. "My sister," I said. Harold looked at me with open pity. "A familia." Voice is a doorway. Grief is what opens it. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket and wrote 5 sentences on a blank page. These are the rules Miriam followed. She learned them after Lily disappeared. He read them aloud. "The signal is strongest at 1:13 in the morning. Ask only one question during each transmission. Never speak the full name of the dead. Never answer when a voice asks whether you're listening. Every time you respond, you surrender one memory of the person you're trying to reach." I almost laughed, but no sound came. "That last part is impossible." Harold pointed to the bracelet. "Tell me the color of Lily's eyes." The answer should have come instantly. I remembered her smile, the pale jacket, the way she rolled her eyes when I teased her, but her eyes were blank spaces in every memory. Blue, I thought. Or gray. Maybe green. Panic rose through my chest. "I do not know. You answered the radio last night." I only said her name. That was enough. Nora sat beside me. "Caleb, your mother labeled everyone in the family photographs." I saw the backs of those pictures in my mind, each name written carefully in black ink. Miriam had not been organizing them. She had been trying to remember who they were. Harold opened another logbook and showed us a list of transmissions spanning more than 20 years. Beside Miriam's name were hundreds of dates. The final entry was 7 nights before her death. At the bottom of the page, she had written, "Lily is not the only voice at the station, but she is still there." A radio on the highest shelf clicked on. It had no cord, no batteries, and no tuning dial. My mother began speaking through it. "Caleb, Harold is lying about what happened in 2003. Harold went pale. He reached for the radio, but the speaker crackled before he touched it. "Lily never left the station," my mother said, and the part of the boy who answered her never left either. The radio went silent before Harold could touch it, but my mother's last sentence remained in the room like a door left open in winter. Neither Nora nor I asked who the boy was. We both knew the answer had already found us. Harold removed the radio from the shelf, carried it to a steel cabinet, and locked it inside. "Whatever speaks through that signal uses guilt before fear," he said. "Do not trust a confession that arrives before you remember making it." I wanted to tell him I remembered nothing about locking Lily inside the station, but that was not true. I remembered a metal door, rain striking the windows, and my own hand wrapped around a cold brass handle. The rest was hidden behind a pressure in my mind that grew stronger whenever I tried to look through it. Before I could question Harold, Nora's phone rang. The call came from the county maintenance office. She listened for less than a minute, then lowered the phone and looked at us. "Aaron Bell is missing." Harold's expression changed immediately. Aaron was a night technician at Morrow Dam. His wife, Elise, had died 2 years earlier after a long illness. According to the maintenance supervisor, Aaron had been inspecting communication relays near the northern spillway when he reported that Elise was calling him from inside the sealed service tunnel. His final transmission had been recorded at 1:13 in the afternoon. "The signal is not supposed to be strong during daylight," Nora said. "It is getting stronger because the water level is already dropping," Harold answered. "They have begun preliminary drainage." Before going to the dam, Harold insisted that we retrieve the old radio from my mother's basement. He sealed it inside a metal case and placed it in Nora's trunk. Then we drove toward the reservoir while gray clouds gathered above the water. Sheriff Owen Pike had blocked the access road with 2 patrol vehicles. He stood beside the barrier wearing a dark rain jacket, his face lined with exhaustion. I had not seen him since Lily's memorial service more than 20 years earlier. He recognized me at once. "Caleb Mercer," he said. "You should not be here." Aaron Bell heard his dead wife through maintenance radio. Owen glanced toward 2 county workers nearby. He became disoriented and left his assigned area. "Then why are you searching the north tunnel?" Nora asked. Owen's gaze hardened. "County business." Harold stepped forward. "You know what is beneath the water." For the first time, Owen looked afraid. He ordered the workers back toward the dam, then lowered his voice. "My father spent half his life trying to keep that station quiet. Miriam did the same. You are undoing everything they protected." "My mother spoke to Lily for years," I said. "She was not protecting anyone. She was containing it." Owen noticed the bracelet in my hand. "Where did you find that?" I told him about the hidden room. He reached for the bracelet, but I closed my fist around it. "That belongs in evidence. Evidence from a case your father buried." Owen's jaw tightened. After I admitted that the radio was sealed inside Nora's trunk, he took the metal case without asking permission. He did not ask permission. He placed it inside his patrol vehicle and warned us to stay away from the dam, the station, and every county frequency. Then a voice crackled from the handheld unit clipped to his shoulder. A woman whispered, "Owen, are you listening?" He froze. Nora stepped toward him. "Do not answer." The handheld radio repeated the question in a younger voice. Owen shut it off. A second patrol radio activated inside his vehicle. Then another answer from the road barrier. Within seconds, every speaker around us came alive. County radios, vehicle receivers, emergency intercoms, even the small weather unit inside the guard station began calling names. Some voices sounded frightened. Others sounded relieved. One deputy heard his father. A maintenance worker heard a child. Owen heard his dead son, Daniel, asking why he had left him near the water. The officers stood perfectly still, each of them listening to a private grief spoken aloud in public. Then the radio began broadcasting from inside Owen's locked patrol vehicle. Lily said, "Cal, the tapes are safer than the voices." Owen turned toward me. "What tapes?" I did not answer. He opened the patrol door, but the radio spoke again before he could reach it. "Ask him what Miriam traded to keep me here." Every speaker fell silent at once. Somewhere below the road, deep inside the dam, a metallic knocking answered 3 times. Owen let the patrol door swing shut, without removing the metal case. "Take it," he said. "Take it away from here." We returned to my mother's house before sunset. The basement smelled damp, though the floor had dried. Nora and I carried the cassette boxes upstairs and arranged them across the dining room table. There were more than 200 recordings, each marked with dates and names. Harold brought an old battery-powered player with its tuning components removed. We chose a tape recorded 6 months before my mother died. Her voice began calmly. "This is Miriam Mercer. The time is 1:13 in the morning. I am asking one question." Static followed. Then Lily said, "Mom, please stop answering us." My mother whispered, "I cannot lose you again. You already are. Tell me where you are." A second voice joined Lily's, so similar that only the rhythm distinguished them. "She is at the station. She is cold. She wants you to keep listening." Lily interrupted, louder now. "That is not me." My mother began to cry, not loudly, but with the exhausted grief of someone who had repeated the same mistake for years. "What do you want?" The polished announcer answered, "A memory for a memory." My mother said, "Take whatever you need. Just let me hear my daughter." The tape warped, and a chorus of voices whispered names over one another. When Miriam spoke again, she sounded confused. "Who is Caleb?" The recording ended. I sat motionless, unable to feel my hands. Nora crossed the room to the family photographs arranged on the mantel. She turned one over. My mother had written my name, my age, and my relationship to her on the back. Every photograph carried the same kind of label. Daughter, son, husband, friend, not organization, not sentiment, instructions. She had traded away the people she loved one memory at a time. Nora opened another cassette case. Inside was a note written in my mother's trembling handwriting. when I no longer recognized Caleb, given the tape marked October 23rd, 2003. We searched every box until we found it hidden beneath the cardboard lining. As I placed the cassette into the player, the telephone rang in the hallway. The caller identification screen displayed Aaron Bell's name. Nora answered without speaking. For several seconds, there was only the sound of water moving through a narrow space. Then Aaron whispered, "I found Lily in the north tunnel." Behind him, my sister's voice said, "Cal, do not play that tape." The voice on the telephone sounded exactly like Lily, but the fear beneath it belonged to someone who already knew I was going to ignore her. "Cal, do not play that tape." Nora held the receiver away from her ear while water rushed through the line. Aaron Bell whispered something we could not understand. Then the connection ended with 3 slow knocks. The cassette marked October 23rd, 2003, waited inside the player. I stared at the button beneath my finger. Every warning I had received told me to stop, yet every unanswered year of my life had led to that moment. I pressed play. At first, there was only rain and the distant rumble of thunder. Then my mother's younger voice said, "Caleb, tell me where your sister is." A 13-year-old boy answered from somewhere far inside the static. "She went home." The voice was mine. My mother asked again, and the boy repeated the lie with less confidence. "She went home before the storm." A door slammed on the recording. I heard myself breathing hard. Then Lily's voice came through what sounded like a handheld radio. "Cal, please come back. The door will not open from this side." The dining room disappeared around me. I was no longer standing beside Nora and Harold. I was 13 again, running through the abandoned station while rain struck the windows like handfuls of gravel. Lily had discovered the hidden room weeks earlier. She believed someone was transmitting after midnight from a station that had been empty for years. I had laughed at her, then dared her to prove it. That night, we climbed through the broken fence with 2 flashlights and 1 portable radio. Nora had waited outside until the storm frightened her into leaving. Inside, Lily found the hidden door behind the studio. I remembered watching her step into the narrow room and place her bracelet on the floor so the little charms would not jingle during the recording. Then every reel on the shelves began turning. Voices filled the dark. One of them called my name in my father's voice, though he had died 5 years earlier. I panicked. I pulled the metal door shut and turned the latch because I believed I was trapping the voices inside. I did not understand that I had trapped Lily with them. On the cassette, she called through the portable radio. "Cal, open the door." My younger voice answered, "Stop pretending to be her. It is me. Tell me what you broke last summer." Lily answered immediately. "The blue bird on my bracelet. You stepped on it, and you made me promise not to tell Mom." I remembered standing in the corridor with my hand above the latch. I knew it was her. I also heard other voices behind her, repeating her words a fraction of a second late. Fear made the decision for me. I ran. The recording continued with Lily breathing into the radio as water entered the hidden room through the old antenna conduit. She did not scream. She kept saying my nickname softly, as if she believed I would return if she remained calm. Then another voice spoke through the same channel. Polished, patient. "Are you listening, Caleb?" My younger self answered, "Yes." The tape hissed, and something changed in the memory. The hallway lengthened. The studio lights glowed without power. A dozen voices began describing things I had never told anyone. My father's funeral, my mother crying in the garage, the secret wish I had made on my 13th birthday that Lily would leave me alone forever. The announcer said it could make that wish come true. I dropped the radio and fled the station. By the time I reached home, I had already forgotten the hidden room. I remembered only rain, Lily walking toward the ridge, and my mother asking where she had gone. The frequency had taken the memory, but it had kept an echo of the frightened boy who answered it. The tape clicked, but it did not stop. Miriam's voice returned years later, older and exhausted. Caleb did not abandon her willingly. The signal took the memory from him before he reached the road. I helped him keep the lie because I thought forgetting would save him. Harold closed his eyes. Nora gripped the edge of the table. My mother continued. Lily remained in the station long enough for the frequency to learn her voice. I heard her 3 nights after she disappeared. She told me not to answer. I answered anyway. Static swallowed several seconds. There are 2 versions of my daughter now. One remembers being Lily. The other remembers only what we give it. The player slowed. Lily spoke next, but the voice was smooth and calm. Caleb, I forgive you. My chest tightened. There was no pause before my name, no familiar warmth, no trace of the sister who had always called me Cal. Nora heard it too. That is not her, she whispered. The tape continued. The false Lily said, bring the radio to the station when the reservoir falls. Open the north tunnel. I can come home. Behind her, almost buried beneath the static, another voice struggled to be heard. Do not believe it. That voice called me Cal. I leaned closer to the speaker. The real Lily sounded faint, distant, and exhausted. It is wearing me. Every time Mom answered, it learned another part. The announcer interrupted in my mother's voice. You left her there. You owe her a way back. The tape stopped. For several seconds, no one moved. Then every family photograph on the mantel fell face down at once. Harold crossed the room and unplugged the player, though it had been running on batteries. The signal is pushing harder because the dam release will expose the grounding array, he said. Once the antenna clears the water, the station will no longer need the radio. Nora looked toward the dark window. Then every speaker in Greyhaven becomes a doorway. My phone rang again. Aaron Bell's name appeared on the screen, but when I answered, Sheriff Owen Pike spoke. We found Aaron outside the North Service Tunnel, he said. He is alive, but he does not remember his wife, his job, or his own address. There was no one else in the tunnel. I asked what he had seen. Owen remained silent long enough for the static to rise between us. He keeps repeating one sentence, he said. Lily is not asking to be rescued. She is asking to be separated. A soft click sounded from the basement below. The radio had turned on. Through the floorboards, the false Lily called my full name. Then the real Lily whispered beneath her, Cal, when it says it forgives you, that is how you know it is lying. The false Lily kept calling my full name from the basement, while the real one whispered beneath her, Cal, do not answer either of us. Nora, Harold, and I stood in the dining room listening to 2 identical voices compete through the floorboards. One sounded warm, steady, and forgiving. The other was faint, broken by static, and terrified of being heard. That difference finally made the truth impossible to ignore. The thing below us was not pretending to be Lily Badley. It had been practicing her for 23 years. Harold took a spool of copper wire from his coat and wrapped it around the battery-powered cassette player. We need to isolate the original signal, he said. Every recording Miriam made contains both voices, but the imitation sits in the center frequency. Lily may still exist in the interference around it. I carried the tapes into the basement, while Nora followed with the player. The radio sat on the workbench, glowing at 6:10 a.m. Water had spread across the concrete in a perfect circle almost 6 feet wide. The false Lily spoke first. Caleb, Mom understood what you owe me. Then the real Lily broke through with a burst of static. It is not one person. The dial needle trembled. Harold connected the cassette player to a small filtering device he had built from old radio parts. Ask one question, he warned. Only one. I looked at the radio. What are you? The basement lights went out. In the darkness, the speaker released a low hum that seemed to come from the walls, the pipes, and the earth beneath the house. Then dozens of voices answered together. We were waiting to be named. The polished announcer separated from a chorus. 60 people below the ridge died, without a warning, in 1957. Thomas Vale tried to speak their names, and his voice was cut off with theirs. 61 voices entered the grounding array beneath the valley. Their names disappeared from the broadcast. Their voices remained. Images flashed through my mind. That did not belong to me. Porch lights vanishing beneath black water. A kitchen radio repeating half of an emergency message. Families calling to one another through rain. The impressions carried no violence, only confusion, unfinished goodbyes, and the terrible certainty that help had arrived too late. Harold adjusted the filter. The chorus fractured. Individual voices emerged for seconds at a time, each trying to state a name before the announcer pulled them back into itself. "It is not a ghost," Harold said. "It is what happened when too many voices were forced into one signal." The announcer answered him through the radio. "Harold Voss, former engineer, WGHV. You helped Miriam. Keep the channel open." Harold lowered his eyes. "I thought we could separate Lily from the others." "Instead, you fed it memories," Nora said. "Every conversation taught it how to become human." The radio switched to my mother's voice. "Caleb, I did it because I loved her. For one second, I wanted to believe that Miriam was truly speaking. Then the voice made the mistake Lily had warned me about. You should forgive yourself." My mother had never said those words to me. Even before she lost her memories, she had believed forgiveness had to be earned through truth. "You're not her," I said. The radio laughed softly, not with cruelty, but with the calm confidence of something that had heard every private hope in our family. "I'm every version of her you gave me." The true Lily cut through. "Cal, the antenna is under the north spillway. When the water drops below the old grounding ring, he will not need this radio." Nora unfolded the maintenance map across the dry end of the workbench. The original array had once rested nearly 40 feet below the normal water line, but a recent slope collapse had lifted part of the grounding ring onto a shallow shelf beneath the northern spillway. Preliminary drainage had left it less than 6 feet underwater. "How long until it is exposed?" I asked. Harold studied the updated measurements. "Only a few hours." A vehicle stopped outside the house. Sheriff Owen Pike entered without knocking, rain on his shoulders and fear in his face. "The emergency release has been moved forward," he said. "Pressure sensors failed along the northern wall, and the county engineers believe waiting is more dangerous than releasing the water. They want the gates open tonight." Nora stared at him. "At 1:13. Owen nodded. "My father knew the time mattered. He made me promise never to let the water fall that low." "Then stop the release," I said. I tried. The control system rejected every manual override. Harold looked toward the radio. "It is already inside the network." Owen admitted what his family had hidden. In 2003, his father and Miriam found Lily's portable radio near the station. Her final recording warned them that the combined signal could spread beyond WGHV if the submerged antenna was exposed. They sealed the North Tunnel, altered the search records, and declared Lily lost in the floodplain. They believed secrecy would prevent anyone from reaching the station. Instead, Miriam continued speaking to her daughter, and Owen's father helped her obtain county frequencies after midnight. They were not containing it, Nora said. They were strengthening it. Every phone in the house rang at once. The kitchen radio turned on. The television displayed a gray emergency screen despite being unplugged. Outside, car horns began sounding throughout the neighborhood in the same rhythm. 3 tones, a pause, then 3 more. An automated voice came through every speaker. "This is a message from Greyhaven Emergency Management. Residents are advised to remain calm and listen for further instructions." Owen reached for his phone, but Lily's voice replaced the announcement. "Cal, I'm still waiting at the station." This time she used the right name. My heart lifted before the signal changed again. The same sentence repeated from the television, the kitchen radio, and every ringing phone, but each version used a different voice. My mother, my father, Aaron Bell, people I had never met. The announcer was testing identities, searching for the one that could make me obey. How do we separate her?" I asked Harold. He looked at the list of 61 names in the station log. It became one voice because those people were erased from the warning. "We may have to give every voice its name back." The emergency sirens outside began to rise. Through them, the real Lily forced out one final message. "Do not bring the radio to me. Bring the names." Then every speaker in Greyhaven spoke in my own voice. "Nora, when Caleb asks you to open the studio door, do not believe him." The moment every speaker in Greyhaven began using my voice, I understood that the signal was no longer trying to frighten us. It was trying to replace me. Nora stared at the television as my recorded voice warned her not to trust me. Then she took my hand and said, "Tell me something it cannot know." I remembered the summer before Lily disappeared, when Nora hid a paper crane in my locker because I hated being alone at school. You wrote my name on one wing, I said. Then you made me promise never to unfold it. Nora tightened her grip. Keep remembering. Harold spread the list of 61 names across the table, while Owen called the county control center and ordered the reservoir release delayed. No one answered. The emergency system continued directing all personnel to open the gates at 1:13 in the morning. The announcer had reached the dam network, the police frequencies, and every ordinary radio in town. We had less than 3 hours. Harold said the old WGHV transmitter was still connected to the submerged antenna through a cable beneath the station. If we read the victims' names and stories over the main microphone, each voice might separate from the chorus. Once the announcer understood, it would use every stolen memory to stop us. We left with the station logs, Miriam's tapes, and Lily's bracelet. Owen drove through rain toward the ridge. Every radio we passed spoke in my voice. Some called Nora. One used the voice of Owen's dead son and asked whether he was listening. Owen shut off the dashboard radio without answering. The WGHV tower glowed red from base to tip. Its doors stood open, and music from 1957 played through speakers inside. Between songs, the announcer read weather reports and grocery prices in a pleasant voice, making the station seem alive. The studio clock showed 12:47. That was when the flood warning arrived, Harold said. It is replaying the night they refused to broadcast. Nora carried the names into the control room, while Owen searched for the cable leading to the dam. I approached the microphone. The lights died except for the red sign above the door. Good evening, Caleb, the announcer said through the headphones. Your sister has waited 23 years for you to finish what you started. I did not answer. Nora placed the first page in front of me. I turned on the microphone. Margaret Ellis, age 42, school librarian, lived on Willow Creek Road. A woman gasped through the speakers. For 1 second, the announcer's voice split, and she whispered, "My boys reached the hill." Then static pulled her away. I read another name. Samuel Reed, age 67, retired railroad worker. A man answered, "Tell Anna I heard the bells." One by one, we returned their names, homes, and small pieces of their lives. Each voice emerged briefly before leaving the chorus weaker. The building trembled, though the trees outside were still. At 1 o'clock, Owen found a modern telemetry junction that had been spliced into the old service cable. He disconnected it, stopping the signal from sending new commands to the dam, but the existing release sequence remained armed. The lights flickered. My mother's voice filled the studio. "Caleb, stop. You are losing Lily." Then my father said, "Open the door and bring your sister home." The voices were perfect, but the words were wrong. They offered comfort without truth. I kept reading. Nora heard her living mother begging for help beneath the station. Harold heard Miriam blaming him for keeping the frequency open. Owen heard his father ordering him to protect the secret. None of us answered. At 1:12, water began spreading beneath the studio door. Only 6 names remained. "You think names make them human again," the announcer said in my voice. "Names only make them easier to find." I read the 56th name. A child broke free from the static and said, "I was not afraid until the radio stopped." Harold steadied the transmitter while I reached the last page. The final name was Thomas Vale, the announcer who began the warning in 1957 and vanished before finishing it. I spoke his name. Every speaker screamed with static, then fell silent. The polished voice returned, shaken for the first time. "That is not my name." Harold looked at the log. Thomas did not create it. He was only the first voice it borrowed. Beneath the interference, Lily whispered, "Cal, the crystal." A glass tuning crystal glowed inside the transmitter cabinet. Harold opened the panel. The announcer immediately used my voice. "Nora, he is going to lock you in the studio." Nora stepped beside me. "Then I will open it myself." She pulled the hidden door. Beyond the observation glass, the 61 figures from the old flood stood in a tight group, silent and waiting. Several feet away, Lily stood alone in her pale jacket. I could not remember the color of her eyes, but I recognized the way she tilted her head when she wanted the truth. "I am sorry," I said into the microphone. "I heard you that night, and I ran." The announcer surged through every speaker. Say her full name. Bring her through. Lily shook her head. Do not give me back to it. I held up her bracelet. Lily, you were here. You were real. You were my sister, and I left you alone. The figures behind the glass began speaking their own names. The sound rose like a crowd, remembering itself. Harold reached for the crystal. The announcer spoke in Lily's voice, pleading now. Cal, if you break it, you will forget my face. Lily smiled faintly. You already know enough. Harold struck the crystal against the metal frame. A pale pulse traveled through the transmitter and down the buried cable toward the reservoir. The tower lights went out. The clock stopped at 1:13. The emergency screens cleared. Owen's radio came back to life, and he shouted his authorization code to the control center. The engineers confirmed that manual access had returned and kept the gates closed. Nora began to laugh with relief, but Lily raised one hand behind the glass. Her lips formed a final warning before the room faded into darkness. It heard you too. The transmitter returned. With one burst of static, and my own voice spoke from a date that had not happened yet. Nora, when I call tomorrow, let the radio ring. The first thing I forgot after the transmitter went dark was the sound of Lily laughing. I knew she had laughed often, knew it had once filled our kitchen and followed me down the hallway. But when I reached for the memory, I found only silence. The powerless station stood silent around us, stripped of every borrowed voice. Rain tapped against the windows. Water stopped spreading across the floor. Behind the observation glass, the figures were gone, and Lily's bracelet lay alone beneath the chair. Nora picked it up and placed it in my hand. The release order has been canceled, Owen said from the control room. His phone finally connected to the dam. Engineers had regained access to the gates, and the reservoir level was holding. Harold leaned against the transmitter cabinet, exhausted but smiling. Then the circuit is broken. I looked at the shattered tuning crystal on the floor. Why did my voice come through after it broke? No one answered. At dawn, county crews arrived at the station. Owen told them an electrical failure had triggered the emergency system. It was not the whole truth, but he formally collected Miriam's recordings and the original station logs as evidence before the building was sealed. Aaron Bell was found sitting near the North Service tunnel. He recovered his name and address by afternoon, though he still could not remember his wife. When Nora showed him a photograph of Elise, he studied it with polite sadness, as if she belonged to someone else's life. That was when I understood that the cost of the frequency did not disappear simply because the voices were gone. It left empty rooms inside the people who had answered it. 6 days later, October 23rd arrived. I stayed awake until 1:13 in the morning, but nothing happened. The North Service tunnel remained sealed, and I finally understood that the date announced in my mother's basement had never been a prophecy. It had been an invitation designed to place me inside the tunnel when the grounding ring emerged. Over the next several weeks, Greyhaven learned what had happened in 1957. The county released the original flood warning recording, the names of the 61 victims, and the records proving that powerful families had been warned first. There were hearings, resignations, and long apologies delivered by people who had inherited secrets they did not create. Owen opened his father's private files and gave every document to the state archive. Harold recorded a statement explaining how the submerged antenna had carried the unfinished broadcast for nearly 70 years. He did not mention ghosts. He spoke about resonance, memory, and the danger of leaving human voices unnamed. Nora created a public collection in the courthouse. Each victim received a page, a photograph when one could be found, and a short account of who they had been before the flood reduced them to a number. After the investigation released Miriam's tapes, I donated them to the archive. I kept only one. It was the final recording from a night Lily disappeared. I could no longer listen to it. The memories, already loosened by the frequency, continued to disappear. First, I forgot the shape of Lily's smile, then the color of her jacket. One morning, I woke unable to remember whether she had been taller than me. I wrote everything down before the memories vanished completely. Lily loved grape soda. She hated thunder, but pretended not to. She collected tiny keys and believed every locked door had a reason to open. She called me Cal. She once forgave me for breaking a blue glass bird, but she never offered me easy forgiveness for running from the station. That mattered. Real love did not erase the truth to make me comfortable. The false voice had offered forgiveness because it wanted obedience. Lily had offered honesty because she wanted me free. 3 months later, I returned to Philadelphia. I went back to restoring damaged recordings for museums and families. Most days were ordinary. I cleaned static from wedding tapes, repaired old interviews, and listened to strangers preserve the voices they were afraid to lose. I no longer used headphones after midnight. I removed every radio from my apartment. Nora called. Each Sunday, always from her cell phone, never from a landline. We rarely spoke about the station. We did not need to. Some silences are shared because both people know what is standing inside them. In January, she mailed me a small box. Inside was Lily's bracelet and a note that said she should stay with the person who remembers her name. I wore the bracelet around my wrist for one day, then placed it beside my desk. The chipped blue bird caught the afternoon light. I cannot picture Lily wearing it, but I knew why it mattered. That knowledge felt smaller than memory, yet stronger than forgetting. The first news signal appeared on February 10th. I was restoring a tape recorded at a birthday party in 1988. The original contained music, children shouting, and a father asking someone to bring in the cake. During a section that should have been blank, I heard 3 knocks. A pause. Then 3 more. I replayed the passage at half speed. Beneath the knocks was a man breathing. The voice was mine. Older, weaker, and far away. Nora, it whispered. When Caleb calls from the radio, do not answer him. I checked the tape's digital history. The sound had not been present when I began the restoration. Its time code was dated February 11th, one day in the future. I called Nora immediately, but her phone went to voicemail. I almost left a message, then remembered the final words from the station. When I call tomorrow, let the radio ring. At 1:13 the next morning, Nora called me. Her voice was calm, but I could hear rain behind her even though the forecast in Greyhaven showed clear skies. Cal, she said, the courthouse archive received a package with no return address. Inside was a reel of tape labeled with my name and a date 28 years from now. She had not played it. I told her not to. As I spoke, the bracelet beside my desk began to tremble. The bluebird charm tapped against the wood 3 times. Then the office telephone rang. I had disconnected it months earlier. Nora heard it through my cell phone. Do not answer, she said. The telephone rang again. On the 3rd ring, my own voice came through the machine without anyone. Lifting the receiver. Nora, are you listening? I covered the speaker and stepped away. The voice repeated the question, then changed. It became Lily, soft and frightened. Cal, it followed the memory of you. I did not answer. The room remained still until the ringing stopped. For several seconds, I believed we had beaten it again. Then Nora whispered my name. I asked what was wrong. She said the reel inside the unopened package had begun turning by itself. From somewhere in the courthouse archive, beneath the names of the 61 people we had restored, a new voice started reading a list. The first name was mine. The second was Nora's. The third belonged to someone who had not been born yet. Before the connection failed, I heard the announcer speak one final sentence in a voice that was no longer borrowed from anyone. A signal does not need the dead once the living learn how to listen.